why can't your body be a site of ancestral wisdom? Like, if you are anxious, if you are ill, if like you're not okay in your body, why can't that also be ancestral wisdom, you know? Because your body is like intelligent on its own.
A few months ago, I woke up one night at about 2:30 a.m. My heart was pounding and my chest was tight, and I felt like I couldn't get enough air into my lungs. It felt as though I had been running in some race, and I was extremely confused and disorientated, and my head was pounding. I wasn't sure what was happening, but one thing that was certain was that I felt a deep and intense sense of fear. I did my breathing exercises and the chair exercise that I explained in episode 27. I filtered my thoughts and my feelings to trace where exactly this fear was coming from, and I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from or anything specific. I mean, sure, there are a lot of things on my mind, but nothing I could think of warranted that state that I was in. I eventually went back to sleep and I went on with my life, but a few nights later, the same thing happened. Except on that night, I opened my eyes and I had a very clear sense of what was going on. I had built up a lot of intense worry about a lot of things, and my body and my mind were struggling under the weight. The truth about me is that I worry a lot. I worry about everything. I worry about my family, I worry about my friends, I worry about my kids, I worry about the cost of living, I worry about crime, I worry about someone breaking into my home in the middle of the night, I worry about hijackings, I worry about the never-ending missing persons alerts that I keep seeing online, and knowing that this person is probably lying dead in a ditch somewhere already. I worry about the rape stats and the number of men who are killing their partners. Basically, I am suffering from what they call a South African. On the other extreme end of this is a more extreme version of this condition called being a black South African woman. It got me thinking about how this worry about so many things impacts on my relationship with spirituality, and how this worry shapes how I interpret the things that I consider to be spiritual. Here's an example. In the last episode, I had started doing a series on understanding different spiritual practices that we may come across as Africans. In the first episode, we did a tarot card reading. Then I was going to move on to Reiki. I did the normal thing. I asked around and got lots of recommendations, and after that, nothing. No one wanted to do it. No one could do it. I remember the one lady that I approached who was well recommended, and I sent her a message and we spoke, and she said she couldn't do it because she's going ePhehlweni, and she felt lost because African spirituality is not something that she's actually ever considered or delved into, which was interesting on its own. Another person basically told me that their ancestors will not allow her to talk about this work. Okay, and I kept trying and I kept trying and I kept trying, and for weeks on end I was approaching people, and for one reason or another this wouldn't happen. Now, none of this is particularly strange. The difficulty of finding sources or people to talk to is something that is very common in the space of interviewing people and talking to people, especially online. But this coincided with a worry that had been slowly creeping up in my mind. When that worry has a firm grip on you, you begin to doubt. In the past episodes, I have explained how certain topics fell apart or certain episodes did not happen because I had learned that this podcast, as much as it is a form of internet content for people to consume, it is also a crucial and almost a sacred part of my personal spiritual journey. And this meant that it was a guided process, and that things will happen or work out in certain ways, and it may not work out in certain ways because of the guidance of the people that I'm working with, or my guides. My constant worry was turning what is a very normal inconvenience of not being able to track someone to talk to, and it was becoming something that I was perceiving as a spiritual challenge. Right now, the vast majority of us are going through a lot. Our communities are a mess. Economically, tough. Wow. And relationships are on another level of icon. And come to think of it, we focus so much on the things that are going wrong in our lives that does feel like it is bleeding into our perception of spirituality, in the sense that it starts making everything about our lives negative, including spirituality. So I wanted to know how these real life challenges shape and affect how we define and deal with our spiritual setbacks. How do you define what is a spiritual setback and what is not? What is just a normal process of life? And what is an actual message from your guides to do or not to do something? So I went and I spoke to Gogo Mahlodi, and she broke down for us how is it that we can understand the differences between spiritual setbacks and normal day-to-day struggles. Get back onto it, and while that is happening, life is happening, right? And I'm like, this has been like a setback in the momentum for the podcast, right? So it's been a setback in the momentum of the work that I've been wanting to do. Then I was like, maybe that in itself is something to look into, right? To look into spiritual setbacks and how we navigate, or rather should I say firstly how we quantify, or what we qualify as a spiritual setback, and then how do we navigate it, because there's a lot of things that are happening in our lives and around the world, and it's difficult to actually figure out what is a spiritual situation and what is not a spiritual situation, you see. So that is the broader idea of what I want to do. But to start off with, I want to know from you, in your personal experience as a practicing healer, have you noticed a sort of pattern in the consultations that you've been having lately? Is there are you picking up on a pattern that says that there's a lot that is happening, or there are specific things that people are generally dealing with in the recent past, maybe let's say a year or two?
I mean, the trend, or the thing that has been obvious for me in the past, I say 2 years, has definitely been like mental health issues. I'm observing people's bodies, people's behaviors, and the bones have their own information about what contributes to those things. But I think even going back to what we're going to talk about today, for me, all things are connected. There's very few people that, so a person could be having ilumbo or ilwani or whatever, and also be experiencing anxiety. Those things can be happening at the same time, and the one can make a person more vulnerable to the other. So maybe the ilumbo, the uptagati, let's call it uptagati, could make someone more susceptible to struggling with their mental health, you know. So it's like, or because someone has a very vulnerable and not so good mental health, that could make them susceptible to ubthakathi, just from like a vibrational and energetic kind of space, you know. So there's like, and this is what I'm realizing in my practice, that me as a sangoma alone, I'm not equipped actually for the problems that people are coming into my ndumba with.
Really?
You know? I'm like, I need a psychiatrist. Because I've been, so the thing that has been happening, I'd say probably this year and like towards the end of last year, young men, you know, who are exhibiting, like delusion, and some of it, like, will throw the bones, and I can see, okay, lo muntu things have been done to them. So it's not completely like, but there's something else happening. And when I start to dig further, then there's usually substance abuse, right? And that you go further down, and then, you know, there's issues of depression and all sorts of other things. And I'm like, I can't do that, you know, like I can't deal with the other issues that are attached to the one that I can see and that I have the skills and, you know, for, which is to banish ghosts and to relieve you of, you know, ubthakathi and those kinds of things. But I can't deal with the depression, you know, even to the point where I'm thinking of going to study psychology, you know, because I'm just like, aibo, you know. So when we talk about, like, even with the spiritual setbacks and stuff like that, it's like, yes, there are things, you know, that are taking place that maybe Inhlanhla Yakho has been closed, or there's Ilumbel Tilo, or there's certain kinds of things that have been cast on you and put on you and in your way. But you also live in a country where like 53% of the population is unemployed.
Yeah.
You know?
We're getting to that part.
You know, so it's like, how do we help people deal with that also? You know, because people like internalize so much.
No, that we definitely going to get to. I have it here.
Okay.
So for you, what in seeing these patterns, what do you think, how are you interpreting when you're seeing these patterns in the consultations, these recurrences of certain, for lack of a better word, illnesses? What is your interpretation of why these things are happening? These patterns are reoccurring right now.
So when I think about, so you might have, I posted this in Labayoguti, I'm interested to see like how prevalent mental health issues were amongst like people post urbanization, for example, right? Let's not even talk about colonialism, but before people moved to the cities and started working in cities and urban areas, like how prevalent was some of these issues. And I have that curiosity because I think the way that we live our lives right now and the world that we live in right now makes us sick, right? So if you're a person who is living under capitalism, right, who's living in an urban area, let's say Soweto, for example, where first and foremost, there isn't even enough space to think. Let's just talk about on a like physical kind of space, right? And then there's just like breakdowns in terms of what community actually starts to look like or what community is supposed to be. So there's like support that you no longer have in the space that you operate. Then there's things like diet, right? The food that we eat, because all of these things contribute to like people being ill, you know, and that's why I'm saying all things are connected. So it's like where you are, how you are raised, the people around you, the food that you eat, the kind of circumstances that you're living under, all of those things contribute to how well you can be, you know. And there are so many people, black people, by so many people, that's who I'm talking about, black people, you know, who in many ways have just been robbed of the opportunity to be well, you know, like from the moment you are born, you know, like the situation is already robbing you of like peace of mind, for example. I'm not even talking about other things, you know. You live in a place where, I don't know, single parent household, people are unemployed, there's 4 other siblings, there's whatever, you know, it's just like, it's a hard life, you know. That stuff contributes to your mental health, you know. That stuff contributes to, like, on a very basic level, even your nutrition, guys. You know, like what you're able to put into your body so that your body can be well, you know. So I have the curiosity with like mental health, but then there's things like high blood pressure and diabetes and all of these other things that we see people being ill with in the city, you know. And I'm not saying that in Makaya people don't have high blood pressure and stuff, but we would find that the prevalence is probably much less and caused by other things like stress, you know. So it's just like the world that we live in is not encouraging for health, and you have to be quite deliberate, to be well in this world. And it doesn't take like just going to isangoma yakho nokufutha nokphalaza every 3 months or whatever. It takes you taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical body, taking care of the relationships that you have with people, taking care of your mind. All of those things need to work together. And I think Isinto understood that, that the mind, body, and spirit are actually all connected, and like the circumstances that you live under contribute to umoya wako. Because when we talk about feelings or emotions, we say umoya wam upants, or so it's like there's a much more like intrinsic and connected consideration for how those things work together. How your body being well contributes to your mental health, how your mental health contributes to your emotional state and your spiritual state, and because we're living in this place where we're disconnected from those kinds of things, then this is the result where like literally people are ill. But I can't deal with that alone, like Ngisangom, I need a psychologist. Like the young men that I'm talking about, those men need to go to rehab first and foremost, or some kind of like substance abuse intervention situation. Then they also need to be engaging psychologists and therapists, right, to unpack how they got to the place that they got to, and then maybe I can come through to come and alleviate some of the things that are a consequence of them not being well, right? And being open to ubtagati and all of those kinds of things. And then, I think with men also you need like a mentor, as well, like someone who can guide, like we need male elders that can guide men as well, So those are like things that I can't do.
In saying that, in your interest in wanting to know the prevalence of mental illness prior to colonization, to put it simply, is that you trying to understand how healers at the time dealt with mental illness so that it can inform how you can help? Is that the reason?
I think it's also like in an indigenous society, what did mental health look like and what was it understood to be, right? And I would imagine for us, which is why even like we have this place or this contestation even now of like ubizo or is it uyahlanya, like there's that thing,
Yes.
So I think the connotation would have been that there's a spiritual issue here that is not allowing this person to be well. But we also now know that it is quite like chemical, right? But all of those things can be influenced by the environment as well, and so I think the environment is like the source and what indigenous healers would do to look at like the state that this person was living in and the conditions that they lived under, and looking at their life beyond like them, but like how do the things that are happening around this person contribute to this person's unwellness.
When you think about it, your question about mental illness in the olden times, intuitively, what do you think healers did? Like when you try to picture yourself in that time, what do you think, if you were to come up with a solution, what do you think people were doing at that time?
I think in that time people did understand it as a spiritual like ailment, and so I think the treatment and the method of restoring and healing whatever had there would be in the spiritual context, and the relationship between what we understand as psychology and also like our genetics is quite an interesting one, so I don't think that indigenous healers were far off. I think they might have some things to teach some psychologists and psychiatrists, about why or how people become the way that they are and the work that needs to be done to restore, because I think at the root of it often is trauma, and that can affect you on a spiritual and energetic level, and I think they were dealing with that level of things as opposed to the symptoms of what this thing is,
So in going with that thought and the intuitive thought, it would make sense then to say maybe people were less sick simply because the world that they live in was less dirty, if I can put it.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is at the core of it what I'm saying, that the world that we live in as it is now is conducive to ill health, to being unwell, you know, and our indigenous ways are the ones that were more considerate of us as part of a community and us as people, and functioning in a way, like, I don't know, I feel like I have a beef with capitalism, and anyone who listens to the previous one will know that. So like the world that we live in is capitalistic, right? And prioritizes the individual as opposed to the collective, whereas our indigenous ways allow and insist on collective understanding and collective ways of being. Yes, you are important, but you're important because you're part of a collective. You know what I mean? And so the ways of life that Ubuntu basically actually, you know, like life under Ubuntu, with Ubuntu as a premise and as an ethos of living, that allowed people to be well. And even with that, like being taken care of by other people, you know. Whereas in this place that we're operating in right now, this world as it is, it's very individualistic, you know, to the point that people don't know how to even connect with each other, like on a very basic level, you know.
Doesn't this then, not to point fingers, but doesn't this then call on the healing fraternity to adapt? Isn't that also a sign that maybe the way in which healers are taught is not staying as current as it should be in equipping healers as much with immunity and all the rituals and the spiritual practices, but also equipping them with very practical psychological skills, psychology skills, if I can put it that way?
I think you are the healer that you need to be to serve your community, you know. So if you are operating like myself in an urban area, you know, where part of what people come to you with is actually like a lot of this other psychological, emotional kind of issues, then you're going to be called and you're going to be led to a place where you have to extend yourself, you know, and to grow your expertise. But if uhlale emakhaya and people are coming ngeliso, then that's what you do, you know, like keep it liso, you know, like your community demands you to be the healer that it needs, you know. So people respond to their community, and maybe I imagine there's many other healers like myself in the city, in urban areas like Johannesburg, who feel that very real need to know more and to do more and to learn more, you know. But the thing about like what you learn Mautwasa, that's all like elementary, you know. You keep learning, you know, like that's literally being taught the alphabet, and then now you must go read and then comprehend and then do more research and write and learn more, you know, like it's the foundation, you know, of what it takes to be able to serve people in a way that allows for their healing. But how they're going to be healed is something that you still have to go and investigate for yourself, you know, depending on the kind of healer that you are. And I think, again, you know, people always say the samadlos are fine, you know, so another person, like even our expertise is not the same, you know. Another person deals only with children. I'm
actually thinking about the expertise element in that, from what I thought you meant would be that there would be a formalized way of studying further, of specializing. But I think what you're saying is that specializing should be an individual thing.
Yes.
It can't be you go, for example, you would go a Pehlweni for your prescribed 3, 6, 9 month period, whatever. And then you would then, after that, there would be Postgrad.
Yeah.
A Postgrad where then you would go within the I want to say Uktwasa process, but maybe it's not, but where then you would augment what you know with, you know, there are people who could specialize in economics, and people could specialize in psychology, people can specialize in obstetricians.
That thing is so interesting about like what you are called to do in terms of the healing work, you know, because even from a Phehlo perspective, like there's different kinds of initiation schools, there's different kinds of ugobela, right? And I believe that Ildozlako leads you to the gobela that you need for the kind of work that you're going to do, you know. So my gobela can't be the next person's gobela. My gobela is my gobela because of the work that I need to do.
Okay.
Right? Ipehlo, you know, as well. And of course, like, it's not the end all and be all. Like, after all of that, those people, that interaction, there's still more to learn, right? But you get the tools that you need for the work that you're going to do. So, for example, I mean, I talk about this all the time. Uguti, like, Bidalang Twase Corner versus where I'm operating now. It's completely different places, right? But because of how I've been taught and what I've been taught, I'm able to bring some of that into my community, you know, to help and to heal people and to do all of that other work. But Idlozlami continuously shows me, even by the muti that we have in Dumbe and the kind of clients that we have, what we are doing, you know. So I can't want to... so for example, Nyafemba, you know, I know many people in Pandanyam that don't, you know. So I had to go to Ipetlo where they do Umdao, where they do Femba, so that I can learn, because Nidlozel Femba, right? And even like seasonally, sometimes you go Ipetlo in the winter time when there's like certain muti that's being used, because that's the muti that you're going to be using. Omunyu mutu utwasa hlobo, you know, in the summertime where there's particular muti that will be harvested and used, and that's the work that they're going to do. So Ildozlako leads you, you know.
So it's not just where you're going, but also the time frame in
so
which
it's
you're
so
going.
many things. And I think that's the thing of like why I insist on people following the guidance of Amadlozwa and not deciding for themselves, because Idlozi knows the time, the people, the circumstances, you know, why you have to go there. I mean, there's this weird observation where like most of our Ntosos just happen to be on a full moon, and I don't think anyone knows that, like when they set the date, you know. And like they'll usually be back and forth. Sometimes the date will be this and then it will be that, and then it's that date, and then guess what, it's a full moon, you know. So Amadlozi know, you know. And if you're led by that, then the work reveals itself to you, you know. And I spoke about this even the last time, like to be a vessel for the work, you know, like the work happens through you, in spite of you.
Okay, let's bring it back now. That was a nice segue. We're getting now into us mere mortals, not in you Avengers.
I'm a mere mortal.
Right? Do you think that there are things that we deem spiritual that are not spiritual, and things that are spiritual that we think are not spiritual? I'll give you an example. Several years back, I was going for a consultation, and this was a very contentious consultation because I was going to someone new, right? I was going to someone new for a reason I wasn't certain of. And my reason for going to that person was totally a conscious one. It was like, oh, I saw that person, I'm going to go see them because I think they know more about this particular issue than Ukogwam. You know, because Ukogwam is my spiritual mother. She's in her late 70s. I'm talking about scroll things. You know, so I think Gogo won't understand if I have to talk about this with her. So I'm going to go talk to her, to this person who I believe is more to do with the times. So prior to that, I was having sort of strange dreams about this person, you know, and this not necessarily negative, but they were just weird. So come the day when I was supposed to go, I was at home and I was leaving, and first, I couldn't find the car keys. The typical story, right? I couldn't find the car keys. The gate wouldn't open. You know, I struggled with opening the gate. And when I went, I couldn't find an ATM because I needed to withdraw, you know, my lokanyes. And then I couldn't find an ATM anywhere. I was driving around. I got lost, you know. Eventually, I arrived. And safe to say, you can predict that it did not go well. In fact, I think it was one of those times I was playing with things I should not have played with. You know, whether that was not the person to ask or that was not the time to ask about that particular thing. What I thought was a small thing, it was actually a very huge thing in my life. So when I look back at it, that whole process of, you know, I was dreaming or the coincidences of the keys, the gate, the ATM, this, you know, I could tell. It's easy to say that was a spiritual thing happening. today or tomorrow, I can say maybe I have to go to work. I can't find my keys. The gate won't open. I can't find an ATM. I don't consider that spiritual. The same things that could happen on a different day. It's easy for me to say that because I was going for consultation. All of that was spiritual. But if I'm going out namachita, for example, and those things happen, I don't consider it spiritual. So my question is, do we have a difficulty in differentiating what is spiritual and what is not?
I think the short answer to the question is yes, you know, but what I'm learning is that our idea of what is spiritual is attached to like mysticism and like inexplainable things and like, you know, whereas it's actually guidance, you know, it's just guidance, like a slight nudge, a slight suggestion, a warning, a heads up, a whatever it is, you know. And I think even when you get into the essence of the actual spirituality, like it's all very practical, you know, like the ways that Amadlozi communicate and the reasons they communicate is for practical reasons, like to stop you from danger or to stop you from wasting your time or like the timing was off or whatever the case is, you know. But it's actually quite practical. But we have this like ether thing with spirituality of like putting it in this faraway place that is like not really real and woo and all of those kinds of things. And I would take it out as guidance even if I was going out namachit, not only when I was going, you know. And I think for me that's like where you build the record and the archive of being able to know when amadlos are communicating and when they're not. Because another question that I get is like, how do I know? You don't know. You have to do the work of practicing and observing, you know. So that day you observed when you were going to see this person for this consultation. And in retrospect, you're like, oh, actually, that was the guidance of my ancestors, right? Then something similar happens when you're going to work. And I don't know, maybe like as you're driving by, you see an accident and it's like, actually, I could have been in that accident or whatever, you know, but I guess I wasn't there when it happened because I was busy looking for my keys.
Would it be naive to say everything is spiritual?
I think it would be. You know, it's such a difficult thing, guys, this thing, you know, and like that's the only way you get to the core of what is true and what is happening, by being honest with yourself, right? And not projecting your insecurities or your desires or whatever onto like random things, you know, but like don't also be stubborn, you know. And so to answer your question of like, is everything spiritual? Not everything is spiritual, but I know that like Amadlozi and the universe is talking to me all the time. You know, I know that there are ways that like I can't even fathom how communication is coming to me. Can I tell you a story?
You should see your face.
So on Sunday, I was going to a tavern to go buy some alcohol.
Yes.
And as we walk into this place, I was with this girl, Lihle. I had just met her and she was like drawn to me. She's like, no, get our cup or whatever. Okay, cool. We walk into this tavern. And as we walk into this tavern, the lights come on. Right? And they were so happy to see us. They, you know, this man was like, and it's like Eric Ing, there hasn't been electricity for 2 days, Luna like Ena, and you know, now there's light. And he started singing Sifila, and I'm like, you know what, we didn't bring the electricity back, but I don't doubt that I needed to be there for that moment, even if it was for me to remember something. You know, for this man to say to me, you come with light. Like, that's something that I needed to hear that day. I'm not the one that was switching the thing called Escom, but I was there at that time. Like, literally, when we walked in, the lights came on. You know, being the person that I am, I can't take that as a coincidence. Before we walked out of the house, we saw and I was like, Mina, everywhere I go, look at these people. And then that thing happened. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to center myself to be like, oh, I brought the light. But I hear what this man is saying to me. I hear it. I hear this message that in this random ass moment is for me, you know, and I take it. And I take it and I receive it.
Maybe, could it be that why we don't think certain things are not spiritual is because if it is spiritual, I'm looking for something profound in everything.
Yes. And that's why I'm saying, like, our idea of what is spiritual is like, so it's there, man. And it's like almost not real, you know? And like people are looking for the fireworks and for the hoo-ha and the moment and the drama and the, you know, like all of those kinds of things, where it's like sometimes it's a really quiet, subtle thing, you know? Sometimes it's like consecutive things that happen quietly, you know, like something's been happening for the whole week or 3 days or twice today or whatever, you know, and not in a way that's like loud or anything, but just like quiet.
You know, with this thing of interpreting things as spiritual or not, recently with the recent 5 or so years with the blowing up of talking about African spirituality, there's always been this talk of, you know, the 3 a.m. prayer. Why do I wake up at 3 a.m. every night and this and this? But then when you look at what's happening now, asilali Joe, we are stressed, you know. You wake up in the middle of the night, whatever, 2 o'clock, that 3 o'clock, Leo, you wake up, your heart is beating fast, you're stressed, you know. If it happens that you're waking up at 3 a.m., but at the same time, you know that you're waking up because your brain is refusing to sleep. And some people will say, no, it's because, you know, amadlozi are talking to you. But at the same time, you're like, no, I actually have anxiety.
Yeah. And even that, guys, why can't your body be a site of ancestral wisdom? Like, if you are anxious, if you are ill, if like you're not okay in your body, why can't that also be ancestral wisdom, you know? Because your body is like intelligent on its own and it knows. So, and I say this to say that like there's no real need to separate, you know, like those things, because your body's showing you that you're not well. And like if there's like anything that Amadlozi wants you to be, it's to be well, you know? So like that interruption in your sleep cycle is something for you to take note of, you know, on all levels, on a physical level, on a spiritual level, on a mental level, on all the levels that are necessary for you to figure out what's actually going on here, you know? And I think maybe to go back to the question that you asked earlier on about like being the healer of the times and all of those kinds of things, I think what people need to understand is that holistic healing is what is required, and a holistic view of yourself as part of a community and a person in the world is what is going to relieve you from this like unreal expectation of being saved or whatever it is that people are looking for, you know? Like you just need to be quiet enough, alert enough, aware enough, present enough to understand what your mind, your heart, your spirit, and your body is trying to communicate to you. You know, like you just need to be present and aware, you know, because the intelligence of our ancestors is also in our genetics, is also in our blood, you know, like all of those things are genetic as well. Like they're encoded in our DNA, you know, so we need to pay attention to our bodies as well, you know. And the issue of insomnia is another one. Again, in Dumben that I've been seeing. And among it, yes, living high-strung, like stressed out lives, you know, lots of caffeine intake, just like physically, they're not at their best place. You know, like these are people that need to be working with dietitians. These are people that need to be looking at their lifestyles. These are people that, you know, need to be doing something else, you know. And then maybe when I feel like, okay, we've taken care of the other thing, we can come and see if those 3 a.m. wake ups are still happening, you know. But even that, like, if you are alert at that time when you should be resting, you know, then connect where you need to connect. And sometimes it's with your own body, and then sometimes it's with amadlos.
Right. So talking about the thing of whether we interpret things as spiritual or not, it brings me to the thing that we touched on earlier, in that unemployment is 35%. Youth unemployment is close to like 50%, right? We are starting businesses that are failing. we're going to school, dropping out, or they are graduates with no jobs. Many people have been told this is happening to you because you haven't done this, you haven't done this, Gogo, umama, ubaba, next door neighbor, your friend this, your friend that. But we're facing a national issue, right? So how do we interpret things that are happening on a national level?
Don't internalize them.
Because now I'm sitting at home. I've sent 50 CVs, 100 CVs, nothing is happening. I'm not imagining the other 35% out there that is going through that. I'm imagining, and then there will be, I'll go see someone who say, your surname is this, your surname is wrong, umsamo wako asekhaya is wrong, this wasn't done for you and you didn't have imbeleko, how are people supposed to interpret what is happening nationally on a personal level?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on, that it's really important for people to, first and foremost, not internalize things. Like, life is happening. Like, and I think it should bring you comfort to know that you're not the only one, as opposed to being like, oh my God. And I say this, but I was literally crying earlier on because I was just like, oh my God, my life. But I understand that I'm part of a community. I think that's going to bring people a lot of relief when you can see yourself as part of something and then you see that things are not personal, right? And then you don't internalize them, right? But also, it's important to hold many truths at the same time.
Opposing truths.
Yes. You can have an ancestral spiritual issue that is maybe getting in the way of what I would call setback, right? So the thing that allows you, not necessarily imali or royalty, but that just allows you to be in the space where you're aligned with the things that are for you.
Okay.
Right? Because that's another conversation as well. Like, people want things that are not for them also. Like, we can't all be entrepreneurs. We can't all have jobs. We can't, you know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be all of us, right? So it's important as you're doing the work of whatever, getting to know yourself, getting to know to know what are your things and to be honest with your heart and with your spirit about what are the things that you are drawn to and the things that you are led to, irrespective of what's going on in your life, right? Because that's where Kosbako is. That's where those things are, right? But even with all of that being said, like, it's important to hold many truths again, to be like, actually, I live in a country where unemployment is ridiculous, so it's not a Voyeswa problem. It's a national problem, and people struggle with that. I think, again, capitalism, because we're raised in a society that's like centers the self and centers the individual, but you can't see yourself and your role in a larger context if, like, you're here, like, you need to step outside of yourself, and be like, I'm a brother, I'm a sister, I'm a father, I'm a community member, I go to this church, I, whatever, like, all of those things encompass your life. And Konalapo, in all of the many roles and all of the things that you feel in your community, where is Ukosbak? Like, where is the thing that is about you? In
the sense that it doesn't necessarily come down to whether or not you earn a salary. Is that what you mean?
Because even that, like, even this, and of course we live in the world that we live in, and imalia funeg, so I'm not trying to say to people like they must be apathetic and be okay with being broke. Buffett. Okay, like, I'm not saying that, but like, there's more to life than that. And it holds us that, like, it holds us trapped, that mentality that is attached to, like, our monetary and financial wealth and value as people. Like, you're valuable besides how much money you get. You are valuable because you're part of a community. I think if anything, I want people to understand that that's what makes you valuable in the world. Otherwise, you're disposable. Actually, you're highly replaceable. You know, if you're just one component of whatever, like individualistic and individualized like that, then nothing depends on you. Actually, you're easily replaceable. But you're valuable when you are part of a community. And if people have that, then I think it can relieve them a lot from internalizing izinto that are just life as spiritual. You know, like impilo is hard, guys. Life is hard. You know, it's not easy, and just because you're going through the hard times doesn't mean ukuthi amadlozi akuflathele or whatever. I do believe that there are things that all of us have been promised, that our spirits and our souls have been promised, right? But the buy-in with that is working within our purpose. And again, that goes to that thing of people knowing what is their purpose, so that you can work in your purpose and that the things that are for you will find you in that place. And it can be frustrating to wait, because that's also not an overnight thing, you know. It can be frustrating to wait, but you do your work, and I know and I believe in my heart that it always pays off, you know. And I've seen as well, nami tsebeletso, you know, sebenza umuntu, and for real izinto ziqhaqheka athola umsebenzi or whatever the case is, you know. So I'm not saying that people must neglect, because also I don't know how they do it. They can do things like that, you know, to block people's luck and wada, you know. So those things corner, but
it's such a. I really don't want to talk about ubutakathi. I hate the topic, but it is such a prevalent. It's prevalent as a topic. Let me put it that way. It's prevalent, especially when you go online every day. You know, black social media basically revolves around umjolo and witchcraft. There's literally nothing else.
With social media, you are. Damn, thank God I'm not there.
And umkosi. Yeah, that's literally what it looks like. It revolves around. So, how much should people think about? Because I'm going to say don't think about it at all. Because, and the reason I say that is because you will never know where it starts and where it ends outside of your own projections.
Yeah.
For example, and one of the things that I realize that happens online on social media is that we are very quick to believe bad things about public figures we don't like. You know, if there's a person that you don't like, whoever is famous, whether they are a celebrity or just online famous, and they say, yeah, this lady has had 50 abortions, and you don't like that lady, you'll be like, typical, vele. You know what I mean? Of course. And so if you take that into your personal life, and someone tells you that, you know, that person that you don't like, or a relative, an aunt, a cousin, a sister, a brother, or this or that, that person has been busy with you. It's so much easier to believe that, you know, and to fall into the rut of then not trusting and basically giving up your own power for yourself into this belief of saying, you know, kono muntu who's doing this, who's doing that. We go on to the TV shows, you know, kono muntu who's doing this, kono muntu who's doing that. There's that, you know, and I think, healers have a lot of work to do in that regard. What are your, in as brief as you can, what would you say to people about ubutakathi and their understanding of it?
So when it comes to ubutakathi, I'd say don't concern yourself with the who. Abatakathi, they're like gossipers. People are going to talk, right? It doesn't actually matter ukuthi uthakathwa ubani. The responsibility that you have is to protect yourself. Okay. Right? Because today is going to be your aunt, tomorrow is going to be your colleague, sasa kuzoba mama say back opposite, then it's going to be somebody's ex-girlfriend. It's always going to be someone, right? And also just because abantu basile, man, deprivation, and I know ukuthi abantu basile, deprivation leads people to those kinds of things, right? Ubutakathi comes from a place of lack, of wanting what you don't have. You know, someone's always going to think you have a better life than them, right? You could be having the shittiest life and someone could be like, I want that house or that car or that man or that woman or that job or those kwaikwais, whatever. People are weird, you know? So don't concern yourself with who. But you have a responsibility to yourself. It's like if you lived in a place where there were lions roaming, You're not gonna have a gate around your house to protect yourself from the lions just because we're God or whatever. You know, he wants you to use your brain to put a fence around your house to protect it, because you know you're in a place where there's all sorts of wild animals preying and doing all sorts of things. You know, so the only concern that you have, or that you should have, regarding umthakathi is, am I doing what I can to protect myself? You know, and that means having a relationship with your ancestors so that you're aware of the guidance that they bring you. Because if we are thakatha, amadlozi are going to let you know. Because so they're going to give you signs. They're going to show you, no, there's a spiritual warfare that's happening right now. You know, so those kinds of things, paying attention to your intuition, to your dreams, to just things. Yeah, well, don't be paranoid, but pay attention. You know, and once you have whatever, or even if you just happen to go to Isangoma for whatever reason and that was revealed to you, then follow through on the treatment so that you know what's no right. But don't like concern yourself with ubanuenza in. People are gonna tagata, like people are gonna talk. You know, it is what it is.
So now, we spoke about the whole unemployment and how to interpret that as a spiritual thing or not. There's another huge issue that we have right now. Past couple of days since last week, there's been the lady Unam Samtwa, who has been trending after being killed by her boyfriend. So again, gender-based violence is the topic of the day. And I'm not saying that whether it's on the rise or I think it's always been. It would be difficult to quantify because of all the number of times that cases are not reported or underreported. And right now, from today, and even in our upbringing, there's a way in which women especially are taught to see relationships, especially the relationship as an adult, long-term committed relationships, as sacred, right? So there's a way in which women are sort of taught to interpret certain things as a spiritual thing. So now there are a lot of women who are with abusive partners, and they are, for them, that this is a spiritual challenge, right? They're seeing it as I need to whatever more, I need to pray more, I need to, you know, for them this is a spiritual challenge that you must fight to retain this. Is there a spiritual response, in your opinion? Is there a spiritual response to gender-based violence?
My safe answer for the purpose of this conversation is going to be no, even though I know that there is, you know. But I say that because I think there's so many other things that we need to be looking at, like the psychology of men in this country, the pathology of men in this country, before we can get to that. And maybe as we're doing that work, we'll see where the root was implicated spiritually, right? Of like how we find ourselves in the place that we are. But I like at this point, that's a conversation, like the spirituality of the crisis that we are in terms of gender-based violence in this country, I think needs to happen once we've had the other very real conversations that are looking at behaviors and psychology and the way that people are brought up. And social workers should be having this conversation, you know, like community members and other people should be having this conversation, and then we can talk about, you know, the spirituality of it. But I don't think there's an answer that I can give right now that will give justice to the thing that we're looking at, you know.
If a woman were to come to you and say, Gogo, I need a consultation, and they come to you and they say, I'm having this issue at home, you know, things are not well at home with me and my partner, and, you know, maybe he's violent, maybe he's not, maybe because obviously, you know, abuse is not necessarily physical, you know. He agangshaye, but you know, akomnandi inli. And I believe that there is a spiritual element in this.
Yeah.
What do you, as a healer, then? What is your process in dealing with such a thing?
So I would definitely encourage her to like secure her own place, like get away from the situation if possible, like definitely, right? Because whatever, okay, I'll give an example of like what I have seen. So a woman will come in Dumbin and be like, this man is treating me like shit. I don't know what's going on. He's been different, blah, 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 blah. We throw the bones and we do see who say, Velu, my brother, I get right. He's not himself. There's other things that are happening there, right? But even with that, that does not excuse him from that behavior. And that's not the work that she needs to do for him to be well. She needs to do the work that are like prioritize her health and her wellness, right? And then he can deal with that when it's his time. Like when he's ready to do that work of looking into himself and being like, actually, I'm not okay. Or actually, I'm going to go to Isangoma, which men don't do. Women are always doing the spiritual labor. But like, that's his work to do, you know? So I would definitely say to that woman, like, leave. And then perhaps you've been, because you've been in a relationship with this person, perhaps there are some things that, you know, have now found themselves or attached themselves to you or whatever. So do the work that needs to be done to make sure that you're in your best place, right? Whether that means a cleansing or whatever the case is that Amadlozi tell us. And then just like prioritize your health and your wellness. Because I don't, like, abuse is a low vibrating energy. I don't think there's anyone's ancestors who wants them to be in that position, you know? Amadlozi wako don't want to see you abused. That's for sure. So they're trying to get you out of there, you know. And I've seen a lot of like amakala as well, or umbango, right? Where maybe like someone's parents were married and then they got divorced or whatever. Some of the things that amadlozi are still holding on to as amakala is like bad behavior, like abuse. To be like umntana wethu as umakoti in that home was not taken care of. So actually this is our child. You know, so those are some of the things when we say there's like conflicting, I don't know, like feelings or amakala atile from the paternal and the maternal. Issues like abuse often come up. You know, my child was not taken care of. Our child was not taken care of in this marriage, and as amadlozi, we will not stand for it, and we don't stand for it. And any children under this marriage actually need to be released ngendlela ethile because this is what happened to our child. You know, so I don't think because amadlozi wakho want you to be well and to be happy. And again, abuse is low vibrating. They don't want that for you. You know, so it's not a spiritual challenge. Maybe there's like, no, it's not. It's not. No. You know, like, and your intuition in that time, which is also the guidance of amadlozi, you know, is so loud when you're in danger. You know, it's so loud. And so your intuition is probably saying to you, like, you gotta go, you gotta leave, you gotta lock this door, or whatever the case is, you know, because it's trying to preserve you, you know.
Sure.
It's not, nobody wants to see you perish.
I think we need to do an episode on spirituality of umjolo.
Yes, definitely.
Because the more you talk, the more I'm listening, the more I realize like there's actually a lot in relationships. And I feel like, you know, the worst thing that we are doing as a generation to ourselves and the coming generations is that we've developed destructive mantras about, you know, umjolo wanyisa. Like we have created almost like a song around dysfunctional.
I mean, that's what we do as South Africans, you know, generally. Mina guys, capitalism. I'm telling you, that is the biggest mtakati in the whole world, man. You know, because even like when someone has the audacity to come into my ndumba to ask for idliso, for example, right? Because they're in a relationship with someone and they think that they need to keep this person. At the root of that, you know, is actually security. This is what this woman is actually trying to secure. Like being with a man, and for some women protection, you know, because the idea of being in a relationship means being, you know, and these are obviously heterosexual relationships we're talking about, but I think even in queer relationships some of these things can be true, you know, like why people think they need to stay in relationships or why people think they need to go to certain levels or lengths to be in relationships, or even why people think they need to be in relationships from the get. You know, and once we start unpacking that, then we'll see that actually like capitalism got us all fucked up.
Because I suppose in many ways the relationship is the meeting point of a lot of things. It's upbringing, it's culture, it's tradition, it's and its economic,
past, futures.
past, futures, and socioeconomics that bear heavily on a relationship. But yeah, I think we need to have just a separate topic on that. So here's something that I personally struggle with in the whole issue of understanding spiritual setbacks and what is direction, what is guidance, right? And let me put it in a sort of a diagram. It's a triangle. At the top we have God's will, right? On the bottom left we have my ancestors' desires, and on the other one it's my wants as a person, right? How do these things work, in that we'll be told that Amadlozi want this, Amadlozi want that, and then there's an issue of, is that God's will? Because the reason I say that is because sometimes you hear people talking about Ilozi when Ilozi wants very material and personal things for itself, whereby you like, but what does that do in the broader sense? It doesn't feel spiritual. It doesn't feel, for lack of a better word, it doesn't feel holy. It feels very material. It feels very personal. It feels very base, very flesh, and then there's the things that I want for myself, which sometimes it seems as though we're assuming that whatever I want is what Rosie should allow me to have if it makes me happy. So how do you navigate that? It's like a strange love triangle where we, especially now in the sense that as much as we talk about Ilozi, we also trying to grapple with God, because a lot of the time when you speak about Ilozi, we kind of don't know where to put God in the mix.
That question is for me straight, because I am going through it. Like, I'm just like, wait, what about me and my needs, And then there's Amal who's just being like, give us time, and then there's God's will, which is just the way that things are supposed to happen. I don't know. I think for me, the diagram is different in my mind, again, resisting this like thing that says like hierarchical and there is more than the other, whereas I think it's a combination of many things. So for me it would be like 3 circles, like God's will, Amadlozi, and then my needs and my wants, and like where those things meet is where the magic happens, as opposed to like there's separate. One that's separate and there's one that's like above the other, but I think on a hierarchical kind of like stance, God is definitely in control. I mean, even Amadlozi, they have their place in the legion of legions, there's angels, there's other people, there's other things, there's both Saint Michael, Wabona, like go busy there wherever things are happening, and I only know and understand what has been revealed to me. Like, I actually don't know how things work, but I do know that there are things that we perceive to like just exist and be physical here, but to serve a purpose on the other side, so like I have a whip, for example, like I don't really use it like personally, but Mahlodi is out there in my dream space just like whipping, and and I know that it's a thing that is there for her to use and it serves a purpose. The Bible is another one. I can read a verse today and then like I can't begin to imagine like what the imprint of those words and those incantations means on a spiritual level. Like for me, it's just this book that I'm reading and I perceive and I'm holding here. But when I utter those words and where they vibrate and where they reach and the work that they do, it's something that I cannot even begin to fathom. Like you see it with prayer, like when you pray over people or when you intercede for people, and it's just like for you, the experience is here, but the effects are actually happening not only across time, but across generations. Because that's the other really special thing about like healing work. Like you don't heal one person, you heal their past and their future, so when you do that work, like you can only do your work here, And that's why, like, again, the idea of being a vessel is something that I insist on, that this work is happening through me. So I don't have too many reservations when amadlozi do make requests, you know, because I don't know, like, what that means for them, you know, particularly, like, things like weapons or, like, ditupa, you know, those kinds of things, like, ornamental. I mean, they're not ornamental, but you know what I mean. Those kinds of things, when they ask for certain rituals, you know, it's.
I think for me, the reason for the question is trying to understand what could possibly be the influences that causes someone to have a spiritual setback. In that is, could there be like a disconnect in that whole process? And I suppose, as you're saying, and it's, I know that it's a vague question in the sense that sometimes you don't fully understand how the spiritual realm works because we have a limited understanding of it. But you brought up something that has been on my mind a lot recently, and when you talk about when someone else is going through something, in that we all know that all of us are in one way or another going through hardship. But then you know of someone, a sister, a brother, a cousin, your mom, your dad, you know, a relative or a friend who is going through what you can see is a spiritual challenge. What are you to do as a person when you're seeing that someone is going through a lot, but you don't know how to?
I think all you can do, if you're not able to actually, like, engage this person and be like, yo, dude, I think you have a problem. And I mean, there's other spiritual healers besides Izangoma, you know, like in the church, there's lots of healers, you know, who do that work of Klambulula Bantu or whatever the case is. So if you're not able to, like, actually say to this person, I think you've got an issue and you should go see Muruti or Ngaka or whatever the case is, then all you can do is pray for that person, you know, pray that the guidance that they need comes to them and then the solution comes. But we can't do any of the work for people. You know, people have to do their own spiritual labor. Like, nobody can do it on your behalf. That's part of your soul's journey, you know, whatever it is, those things are, you know. But yeah, if you can't engage that person, like if you can't outright say to this person, like, I think this is a spiritual issue, for whatever reason, then all you can do is give it to God. Because unless you're from the same family, you know. But if it's like a friend or whatever, then you can only leave it to God, you know. And it's funny because earlier on we were talking about umjolo, but I see this a lot in marriages, you know, where the women are like doing that work of like coming for the consultations. Amadlozi was telling us there's something wrong with the man. He doesn't want to come. He doesn't believe in those things. He's not even willing to pray. He doesn't even believe in Amadlozi. All of that nonsense, you know. And it's like, sorry, baby girl, but you like, you know, you have to preserve yourself, you know, and your children if there are children in that marriage. But you can't do the work for him. And if he's not willing to do it, then that's on his soul's journey. You know, we can't interrupt people's lessons. You know, that's a lesson for your soul and for your experience here now. And if you aren't doing the work, then see you next lifetime doing the same work. Because you didn't do it last time, you know. So I don't know, like, and this is something that I've also had to come to as a healer, you know, like always wanting to fix and to heal and to do that work for people. But I realized I can't get in the way of people's lessons. And I'm here. If people need my help, they can always come to me, you know, but I can't insert myself. I can't do the work for them. I can't, you know.
I'm stuck on when you said that we must always remember that we are part of community, even when, whether you have employment, you are at home, or, you know, your things are not going well. It sort of stuck. It's ringing in my head because I had never really thought of it in that way, because, you know, I think that I'm an individual and what I'm going through is what I'm going through, and the fact that I'm a certain age and I don't have a job and I can't contribute to the family in a certain way, sort of then that lack defines me, and then you sort of withdraw from the community. Whereas you can actually engage more with the community, and that would
Participate more, influence more, restore more, you know.
Because it's strange in when you think about it, in that if a person had a job, a good job, a good paying job, and they had the house that they wanted, that wouldn't necessarily change how they interact with people. In the sense that having more money doesn't mean you would participate more. Because I'm thinking that if I don't have a job now, it means, I believe that it means that I can't participate, I can't engage more, I can't do this, I can't do that because I don't have money. But if I had money, or if I had a job, it doesn't actually say that I would be doing those things.
In fact, so it's like, let's look at the typical setup, right? Anyway, there's always certain people who do certain jobs, right? And then there's the employed, well-off, educated counterparts who attend and come with whatever
on Friday afternoon there.
Yeah, and you take for granted like a person's role to make umsebenzi umgidi umcimbi, right? And like I use the word role very specifically, right? Like it's that person's job. The guy wisang home, right? The person ozang mkombot, the person ohlatsang di pizza. All of those people are usually a certain kind of people that people don't think are valuable because they don't have money or they don't have a monetary value attached to them. But actually, those people are crucial because loyo msebenzi does not happen without that person. And the thing that allows that person like to be in that role is something that most of us look at as something to look down on, right? The fact that maybe this person is unemployed or this person is whatever, right? But, and like, yes, as capitalism, guys, again, like says to us that people are only valuable in a monetary, like financial kind of way. And that's actually what locks you out of community, because now you're not going to be talking to that lady. So you're not going to know how to make mkombot. I get to when figure, so figure. Rich Makoti or whatever. Right? So you're missing out on actual knowledge and information, but you're missing out on community, like interacting and engaging with someone and participating, and that's just like one example of how in our communities people take for granted people's value. But even ekasi, like unemployed people, like who are the people? I mean, Buleng and I had this idea for a show. It was going to be called Omahlalela because we're both unemployed. And like the work. And we were talking about like the guys on the corner. You take for granted that those guys are actually security because they know actually. So if there's a strange car that's driving by, those guys on the corner, those ones that are broke and, they're going to know. They're going to be the first people to know. If there's a missing child, who do you think is the first people that are going to come out of their houses to go look for those children? It's not the people that are at work, So it's like you can't quantify your value and the value of other people based on what you have or don't have in financial terms. Like then you're missing out on the whole experience of community. And even when people say to me like, there's no one in my family that I can ask, I'm like, you're lying. The people that have the information, you don't want to speak to them because you think that they are backwards or they are poor or they are uneducated. You only want to speak to the bourgeois, like your parents. Yeah. Abafana nani amabona again who went to private schools and stuff like that. That will know ithakazelo. They would know ukuthi kuphahlwa njani. You don't want to engage them. You want to go to Instagram and engage Gogo Mahlodi instead of those people in your actual community. And again, I mean, I think Amados are much more intelligent than we thought, but I think it was these kinds of things and this idea of Ubuntu and having people engaging in a community in this way that did help alleviate mental health issues, that did help give people a sense of purpose. Like what is your thing? Like outside of like what you need to do to pay your bills and all of that shit. But what is your shit? And your community allows you to do that. Ngobungoma, not all of us are going to share matambo. Abanye, they are called to bid. Abanye bashaya iskupu. Abanye imithi. We can't all do the same thing, vele. But the community allows you to find your thing. It's open and has space for you to reveal yourself to it and to find yourself in it. But if wena hey, you can only participate in grozawa sewulis or whatever the case, then you're going to miss out. And you're going to be battling some of those issues in your head and feeling displacement and then you're going to come cry here in my ndumba. Oh, wow. No.
When Gogo Mahlodi said that we live in a system that is basically making us sick, I kept thinking to myself how exactly it was doing that and how did we even get to this point? And I think in answering that question, we're going to need a little trip back in time. One of the biggest shifts in human history came about with the Industrial Revolution. Machines moved much of human civilization away from the farm and into the factory. Through this process, life became less about families sustaining themselves and their broader community, but more about running efficient assembly lines in the factory. Speaking of assembly lines, the person who pioneered the factory assembly line was the icon of the Industrial Revolution and the Joshua Doe of cars, Henry Ford.
The dying 19th century left in its wake a forlorn figure, Dobbin, the family horse, soon to be replaced by a fearsome monster that breathed fire and drank gasoline.
Now, Henry Ford did not invent the motor car. He simply came up with ways of manufacturing them better and faster. One of the ways he figured that this could be done was to have workers who were happier, or so he said. So, in the early 1920s, what he started doing was he started paying his factory workers double what other employers were paying at the time. Apart from that, Henry Ford popularized two things that changed basically how human beings exist on this planet. The first thing that he did was to reduce the standard working times that a worker spent at the factory. Back then, the standard working time was 14 hours. 14 hours. So, back in the old days, you worked from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. Oh, side note, since there were no alarm clocks in those days and few people had clocks themselves, you know how people got up to work on time? Well, in Europe, from the 1760s to the early 1920s, they had lovely gents called the knocker-uppers. These homies were equipped with a long bamboo stick and they would walk up to your house and knock on your bedroom window until you woke up.
Hello, Governor! How you doing?
Now, good old Mr. Ford changed the working hours from 14 to 8 and thereby inventing the 9 to 5 as we know it today. The second thing that he came up with was reducing the number of working days. In those days, everybody essentially worked 7 days straight. So with the increased efficiency in the factory, your uncle in the car business cut it down from 7 days to 5. And in doing that, Henry Ford effectively invented the weekend. But it is important to note that he did not do this out of the goodness of his cold, profit-driven heart. In fact, here's how he described the necessity of the 2 best days of your life. In his own words, he said, "People who have more leisure time must have more clothes. They eat a greater variety of food and they require more transportation in vehicles." In this process, Bra Henry basically gave birth to your entire Instagram feed and to what we call today consumerism. WikiLeaks defines consumerism as a social and economic order that encourages the acquisition of goods and services at an ever-increasing amount. What the Industrial Revolution and all its innovations did was to turn the world into a machine. The world system that we live in today is built on making profits. The best way to do that is to give us just enough money to buy things and just enough time off to come back and make more money for the company. Everything, including the 9 to 5 and the 2 weekend days, exists to serve the machine of profit. So, how does this make you sick? Well, first off, the system had to get rid of the community. In our historical context, the colonial system forced men to leave their families and work in the mines. Women eventually followed, leaving behind their entire family support systems as well. Now, finding themselves in newly formed townships, many black families had to live with the reality of fathers working horrible hours and leaving at night to catch early trains and buses and coming back at night just to earn slave wages. Black women, on the other hand, were in a double bind because legally they were not allowed to work, and socially they were not able to work because someone had to stay home and look after the kids. Mind you, white people were also in a similar or maybe slightly better situation in that white women were also generally unemployed. But when the market did open up to white women, they faced a challenge. Who will look after the kids? And the answer? Exactly, your grandmother. So Gogo left her kids to fend for themselves and learn about life from the streets and neighbors while she looked after Abo little Yakubus's ass. But the system allowed for white people to adjust, and it wasn't just through higher salaries either. It was through town and municipal planning. The suburbs were designed for optimal development of family bonding and leisure. The houses and the yards were big and close to work to maximize the amount of time a person spent at home with their families. At the same time, the townships were built for the fundamental purpose of making sure that black lives are hindered in absolutely every single way possible, and that black families are as dysfunctional and as disconnected as they possibly can be. But the thing about consumerism within a capitalistic system is that it tells us that we must all aspire for the same thing, meaning that you are made to believe that you and Yakubas are meant to have the same exact life. The education system that we have now was built around manufacturing factory workers who become consumers in an endless cycle. The rise of the fourth industrial revolution in some ways means that there will be fewer factories. That is partly why the education system that we have now is on the brink and thousands of graduates have no jobs. Technology may have taken away the factory, but it has also cranked up the consumerism all the way because the system now is totally out of balance. This is why you feel sick. This is why you feel like you cannot keep up and everything in your life is overwhelming. At some point, you can't help but wonder what an ideal world actually looks like. Like, what happens in a healthy system? There are lots of people who say that we need to go back to the old way of doing things. Like, we have to go back to planting our own food and making our own clothes and using cloth diapers for babies. Personally, I think it's really nonsensical and really impractical. One of the most alluring factors of the capitalistic system is convenience. When you want lights, you switch on a button. When you want heat, you press a button. You want food, you go to your local store and you get just about anything that you can afford. And it is an easy allure to understand because at the very least in all that we do, in all the work and the rat race that we are caught into, convenience is something that gives us the slightest of respite from the system. And for me personally, the idea that a healthy way of living is to perpetually live in the 1300s is naive because it implies that any kind of progress is inherently harmful and that we must stay in the same state of being for basically the entirety of human existence. But I will admit that, in my view, living a life that is more aligned with nature is necessary. This is because a fundamental principle that nature teaches is that everything changes. This goes against our consumerist worldview where we want to live soft life till we die. A life where it is always summer and the sun is always just about to set and we all look good and we are balancing amasavana on our foreheads and we're dancing our lives away to the Yenos. Maybe a life more in line with nature is one where we understand that all things must pass. Days pass, nights pass, seasons pass. Because as things are now, we take the changing of seasons as a spiritual attack. We take the falling leaves of autumn as our lives falling apart. and not as life preparing us for the next phase. Worse than that, we don't know what to do during the winters of our lives. We don't know what to do when the light of the day is shorter and the nights are long and cold, when things are less abundant. We take spring as a blessing and autumn as a curse, and we ignore that both are governed by the exact same rules of nature. So we end up believing that summer is a higher level of spirituality, and we think that winter is a spiritual wilderness that needs some kind of cure. The one thing that I believe will not be as rife in a healthy system is fear. Our systems currently, our external world systems and our internal emotional, spiritual and mental systems are fueled by fear. Our world in its entirety runs on fear. A fear of not having, a fear of not belonging, a fear of not being wanted. The worst thing that the world that we live in has hammered into our minds is the belief that nothing exists out of having a job and buying nice things. This is why we have such a broken relationship with our spirituality, and this is why we don't know what spirituality is and what it's not. This is why we don't understand what is a spiritual moment and what is not a spiritual moment. We don't know a God from whom we don't want things. For us, spirituality is just like going to the shop. We believe it is a trade of some sort. And outside of that system, we essentially don't really know what to do with spirituality. The irony is that we all yearn for a sense of community, yet this very sense of community has been commodified. Social media sells us a sense of belonging in exchange for making billions for these platforms, while leaving us riddled with anxiety and fear. Moving to an off-grid life where we live on farms and act like we don't need Google is impractical and frankly unnecessary. Human progress in one way or another is necessary. My hope is that maybe, just maybe, as we try to move into this better way of doing things and living and being, we can do so with a little less fear in our lives. My name is Vusumzingwane. Thank you very much for joining me on yet another episode of The Journey Kwantu. I wish you light, I wish you courage, and I wish you all the very best on your journey. Makwande.